Hello and welcome to another episode of A Smarter Way to Retire, the podcast where we break down the steps to building a confident and smart retirement plan. I'm Tony Leonardi, your CFP professional based here in Fairfield County, Connecticut, and I'm thrilled to be with you today on May 23rd. Many of you know that I have two boys, Tony and Mark. Tony, or as we call him, Tonino, which means Little Tony in Italian, which was my nickname growing up. We passed it on to him. Tony's 27. He's in France this week right now with his girlfriend, Maddie. They're enjoying a little time away and some good food and wine, no doubt. I hope they're having a great trip. By the way, the bumper music that I use for these podcasts comes from Tony's album, Don't Go Alone. If you like the music, look him up on Spotify. He's a pretty good musician, if I do say so myself. Mark's my youngest. He'll be 24 in July. He just moved from Chicago, where he's been with his brother since they started college, both at Northwestern. Mark just moved to Manhattan last weekend, and I love having him closer to home, but now I have one in Chicago and one in New York, so I'll have to plan my trips a little bit better now if I want to see both of them. But they're both doing great. They're both computer engineering consultants. Not even sure what that means. I think they do coding, but I'm very proud of them, and they're both great kids and successful in their own right. So here in Connecticut, it's spring, and it's in full swing, although we've had some pretty wet weather the last few weeks, which has me like a week or two behind in my gardening. Some of you may know Lori and I moved into a new home in the summer of 23. The house had a big fenced-in garden, 15 raised beds, but it looked like it hadn't been tended to in quite some time. Everything was overgrown. The beds were falling apart. It really needed a lot of work. So we spent that fall cleaning it up, got it in pretty good shape for planting last year, and we filled that garden with just about every vegetable we can think of. Mostly to see what would do well in that area of the yard where it's a little shady. And we had some success. The tomatoes did great. The beans, the green beans were amazing. But then we got hit with what they called a 100-year storm. A flood that took out our entire garden. Washed away the beds, knocked down the fencing, pulled up the fence post. It was a real mess. So we're basically starting from scratch again this year, and we hope to have better luck, but we're a bit behind, so I think I'll be in the garden most of the weekends. We probably have 100 or more seedlings to plant after we finish our cleanup. The good news is that it looks like the strawberries, the asparagus, oregano, and even the wine cap mushrooms all survived the flood and are coming back strong so far this year, and the garlic is looking great as well. I can actually see the garden from my window as I'm recording here. And as I was preparing this recording, 3 deer walked across the yard headed towards the garden, no doubt looking for something yummy to eat. But working in the garden is a great reminder to me to slow down, get away from the TV, get away from the 24/7 news cycle, enjoy these little moments, and reflect on what truly matters, not only in the garden, but in our financial plans and in our life in general. Family, food, health, growth, and stability. Those are things that we look for in all aspects of our life. So that brings us to Memorial Day, which is this weekend, and it always seems to sneak up on me. The unofficial start to summer. Today we'll explore its history and what it truly means for us. Then we'll shift gears to some economic updates, the recent Moody's downgrade of U.S. government bonds, including the role of rising U.S. debt, especially since COVID, how international stocks are doing well this year, and the S&P 500 index impressive recovery from its recent lows. So let's dive in with a clear, data-driven perspective to help you stay grounded in your retirement planning. Grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. So Memorial Day is this weekend, actually Monday, May 26th, and it's that time that holds deep meaning for all of us. Originally called Decoration Day, it began in 1868, 3 years after the Civil War, when General John Logan called for a day to honor fallen soldiers by decorating their graves. It was first observed on May 30th because that date didn't mark any specific battle, making it a neutral day to remember all who died on both sides. By 1890, most northern states recognized it, though the southern states held separate days until after World War I, when it evolved to honor all American military personnel who died in any war. So what does Memorial Day truly mean? It's about more than just barbecues and a long weekend and the start to summer. It's really a solemn reminder of the sacrifices made for our freedoms. Over 1.1 million Americans have died in military service since the Revolutionary War, with the Civil War alone claiming 600,000 lives. Today and this weekend, we honor those who gave everything by reflecting on their courage and ensuring their legacy lives on. For retirees, this day can also be a moment to think about the stability that those sacrifices afforded us, stability we mirror in our financial plans. Let's celebrate by remembering, perhaps visiting a local cemetery here in Fairfield County, or supporting a veterans organization, or just teaching your kids and family the true meaning of this day. I just raised a brand new American flag on the flagpole in our front yard the other day, so we're all set for a great Memorial Day. Now let's turn to a recent economic headline, Moody's downgrade of U.S. government bonds. On May 16th, Moody's lowered the U.S. sovereign credit rating from AAA to A1, citing persistent deficits and a ballooning national debt. This marks the third and the last major ratings agency to strip the U.S. of its top-tier rating. The S&P downgraded U.S. corporate debt in 2011 amid a debt ceiling crisis, and Fitch cut in 2023 to concerns over debt sustainability. It's all about debt. The U.S. debt has been growing, and it's been a growing concern, especially since COVID. In 2020, massive stimulus spending to combat the pandemic's economic fallout pushed the national debt from $23 trillion pre-COVID to $28 trillion by the end of that year. That was a 22% jump in the debt in just 12 months. Fast forward to today, and the debt is reported to have reached $37 trillion, with annual deficits averaging $2 trillion in 2021. Interest payments alone now exceed $1.1 trillion annually, surpassing national defense spending, according to recent reports. Since COVID, federal spending has remained elevated. Fiscal year 2025's deficit is already at $1 trillion through May, up 23% from last year. This deficit is really getting dangerous now. We just spend way too much money. Pre-COVID, 2019, the U.S. spent $4.4 trillion for the year. Fast forward to 2024, last year, hit $6.75 trillion, over a 50% increase in 5 years. But 2024 revenue was only $4.9 trillion. So we brought in $4.9 trillion, and we spent $6.75 trillion. We have to get our spending under control, but how? That's the big question. It's hard to win elections when you promise to cut spending. That's the issue. What does this ratings downgrade mean for you? It signals higher perceived risk in U.S. bonds, traditionally the safest investment. Borrowing costs for the government have spiked, with long-term Treasury yields briefly jumping past 5% for the first time in 18 months before retreating. And on May 19th, the S&P 500 futures dipped 1.2% in post-market trading after the announcement, reflecting some short-term jitters. For your portfolio, this underscores the need for diversification. Don't rely solely on bonds for safety. If you're holding treasuries, their yields may rise, but so might their volatility. Review your fixed income allocation with your advisor to ensure that it aligns with your risk tolerance. especially if you're in retirement and need stable income. Despite the downgrade, the S&P 500 index has shown resilience. Let's look at its recent moves using the S&P 500 index directly as our gauge. Currently, the S&P 500 is around 5,900, depending on what day you're listening, 5,900 and change. The S&P 500's yearly low was around 4,800 in early April, meaning it's up 23% trough to peak. This rebound, driven by recent trade deals and policy shifts, offers a bright spot, but volatility, like that 1.2% futures dip after Moody's downgrade, reminds us to stay cautious. This also reminds us not to panic. Recoveries happen fast, and if you were nervous and got out of the market in April or May, you would have missed that 23% quick recovery. Meanwhile, international stocks have been having a pretty good year in 2025. International equity markets, particularly Europe and China, have outperformed the US, with some ETFs up 14% or more year to date compared to the S&P 500, which is basically flat so far this year. This outperformance highlights the value of diversification. For clients here in Fairfield County and across the states, adding international exposure may balance risk, especially when U.S. markets face headwinds like this downgrade. Review your portfolio. Consider if a global mix aligns with your goals, but always focus on the data, not the headlines. Since Memorial Day is all about reflection, let's tie that into your retirement planning. Use this holiday as a chance to honor your financial future by reflecting on your goals. Are you on track? Do you need to adjust your risk tolerance, especially with events like the Moody's downgrade or market volatility? Take a moment this weekend to review your plan, maybe over a cup of coffee out on your deck on Memorial Day morning. Look at your asset allocation. Ensure you're diversified. Look at international exposure. Check your emergency fund. Reflection, much like the sacrifices we honor, builds a foundation for stability. It's a small step that can bring back some confidence in your plan. Most importantly, if you're a client of mine, keep an eye on your probability of success meter. I think you'll find that even after a tough few months in the news and in the markets, you'll find that you should still be in pretty good shape for the long run. If you don't have a probability of success meter, let me know. I'd be happy to work with you on building your own plan. So we've covered a lot, from the true meaning of Memorial Day to the Moody's downgrade amid rising U.S. debt, the S&P 500 index's impressive recovery from its low to today, and the strong performance of international stocks in 2025. These updates remind us that progress is possible, but staying grounded with data is the key. This Memorial Day, take time to honor those who gave everything for our freedoms and reflect on your own financial plan. For more insights, visit leonardifamilywealthcare.com. You can also listen to more episodes of my podcast on my podcast channel on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Watch videos on my YouTube channel. And you can even download our 2025 Retirement Reset Checklist if you want to get your planning started. That's on my website. And as a reminder, it'd be great if you can give me a good review on the podcast. Whether you're in Fairfield County or anywhere across the country, let's build a smarter retirement together. So that wraps up today's episode of A Smarter Way to Retire. Until next time, stay informed, stay steady, take care, and have a great Memorial Day with your family and friends. And enjoy a little music from my son on our way out.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Osaic Wealth, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Osaic Wealth is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Osaic Wealth. The opinions expressed herein are for general information only and is not necessarily the opinions of Osaic Wealth or its representatives. Investing is subject to risk, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. It is not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Please consult your financial professional, attorney, or tax advisor with regard to your individual situation.